On today's episode, I'll be talking about the original 1976 Rocky, which celebrates its 50th anniversary later this year.
If you're looking for a man with no plans or programs, and he always leaves a chance to hold hands for romance. Are you looking for the Luke with an old man, a cold hands? It's a creature of the night who heads for his spotlight. I'm here to welcome you to Brandon at Random Reviews. No method when I choose. It's Brandon at Random Reviews. Yeah.
All right, everyone, welcome to Brandon at Random Reviews, covering one unsystematically chosen topic at a time. If you like listening to a guy recap and review movies in weekly episodes, then look no further. To keep up with the newest content, you can find Brandon at Random Reviews on most major video and audio platforms, as well as all popular social media sites. If you enjoyed this, please like and subscribe. Like I said, the movie is Rocky, released on December 3rd, 1976, with a runtime of 120 minutes. This movie is rated PG by the Motion Picture Association of America. Budget, $1.1 million. Directed by John G. Avildsen, I believe is how you pronounce it. He directed Karate Kid parts 1 through 3. So these were the originals. I think they're all with Ralph Macchio. I don't know. I've only ever seen the first one, and I hear that they get progressively worse, and I've also heard that the third one is like terrible, but I want to say he's in all of them, or at least all three. He directed Lean on Me, which is a movie with Morgan Freeman. It's one of these ones where it's like this no-nonsense teacher goes to the inner city to teach and like whip kids into shape and blah, blah, blah. It's not a bad movie. It's just it feels overdone, even though I don't think there are that many movies like this. It just doesn't feel like it needed to be redone repeatedly. He directed 8 Seconds as well, which is, I think, about bull riding. I've never seen it, and I don't even know if that's like fictional or if it's actually based on someone's life or something. I just always remember the poster for some reason. It's like a guy raising his arms up and he looks like he could be a bull rider. I don't know. I feel like I've heard that it is bull riding though. For the writer, we have Sylvester Stallone, who also wrote all other Rocky movies in some capacity. Obviously, there are ups and downs in this franchise, but I would say as far as longer franchises go with like more than 3 movies, this one is mostly good movies. Like even the lesser ones are still pretty decent. There's only one of the true Rocky movies that I have never actually watched because I heard it was so bad, which is Rocky 5. Don't really care to see that one either. He wrote First Blood and all of the Rambo sequels, and honestly, I fucking love the First Blood first movie. I also enjoy the other ones. The only one I haven't seen is the most recent one, which was Last Blood, and obviously I believe that's supposed to be the final movie in the franchise. I like them. They get really over the top, even with, in the first one it gets pretty over the top, but it's like it goes completely off the rails by the second and third movies. And speaking of over the top, he also wrote the movie Over the Top, which is about arm wrestling. And I know what you're thinking, my God, that must have been such a high demand movie. I can't believe nobody had ever made a movie about arm wrestling before. But, Sylvester Stallone met that demand, I guess, because, obviously it's got to be an exciting movie. I've seen it. It is kind of ridiculous, but it's a watchable movie. I will at least give it that. Stallone supposedly wrote the first Rocky script in 3.5 days, give or take, which is pretty impressive. A fun little tidbit is that he was credited as a writer on the movie Cobra, which he also starred in, which is normal. It's based on a book, And if you are just adapting a book to screen, you do get a writer's credit, typically at least, unless you're like ghostwriting or something. But the weird thing is he actually tried to get his name added to that book as a co-author, even though he in no way had anything to do with actually writing the book itself, which is just ridiculous. But I mean, honestly, you see novels, books in general that got turned into movies, and they do that like kind of disliked thing where they will use like a movie poster for the cover of the book on the newer releases just to capitalize on the popularity of the movie. And actually, like, that's kind of reasonable marketing wise, but to actually want your name put on as a co-author when your face might even be on the cover of the new books is a bit insane. But Stallone is just, he is what he is. It's just not completely out of the realm of what I would believe about him. For the composer, we have Bill Conti. He also did the score for Your Eyes Only, which is an early 80s James Bond movie that starred Roger Moore as James Bond. It's actually one of his better movies as James Bond. He was pretty hit and miss. I liked his movies more than I liked him as James Bond, but that one's pretty solid. It's not a bad one to check out. And of course, he also did the music for The Karate Kid because he collaborates with his director a lot. And he also did the score for a movie called Necessary Roughness. I haven't seen that one since I was a little kid. Don't really remember much about it. It's a football comedy. It's like a movie about football. It's all about football, and I was willing to watch any sports-related movie when I was younger, but I need to go back and revisit it just to see if it's as good as I remember or what it was like even, because I can't even remember if I liked it. For the cast, we have Sylvester Stallone, who plays the title character Rocky Balboa. He was also in First Blood and all the Rambo movies. He was John Rambo in those, like I already talked about. Pretty solid overall franchise as well. He was in Tango and Cash with Kurt Russell. And honestly, if I had to pick between these two actors, Kurt Russell and Sylvester Stallone, I would probably say I like Kurt Russell significantly better. I do like his movies better too, but I would be deeply saddened if I had to give up Sylvester Stallone movies. So I can't really say that, like, I really, really dislike Sylvester Stallone. I just like Kurt Russell a little better. And that movie is okay. Not really one of my faves, but I know a lot of hardcore fans exist for it. And he was also in the movie Cliffhanger, which is a rock climbing centric thriller action movie. Haven't seen that one in a really long time either, but I remember it being pretty decent. Talia Shire plays Adrian, and she was in other Rocky movies as well. Honestly, like I said, I mean, you'll hear more about what I think of her in these movies, like her character, what I think of her. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. She was also in the Godfather movies, all three of them, and the first two are notoriously some of the greatest movies of all time. The third one is like a borderline legacy sequel. Like, I want to say that was like a 1990 movie. So it was well after the mid 70s when the first two came out. And that one, they just made a lot of weird choices story wise and casting wise. And if you know anything about those movies, you know what I'm talking about. And she's pretty decent in them. She's more of a supporting character. Like, she doesn't have a huge part in those movies, but she does have some memorable scenes. And she was also in a movie called Deadfall, and you might not have ever heard of that movie. It's got Michael Biehn and Nicolas Cage in it, and this was early Cage when he was really starting to explore how unhinged he could be in a movie, and he really puts it on display. It is a pretty bad movie. I actually only know this movie exists because of the podcast How Did This Get Made, which I really love. They cover bad movies, so they covered it on this, or on an episode. Burt Young plays Paulie, and he was also in other Rocky movies, and he was in a movie called Once Upon a Time in America. That was directed by Sergio Leone, who also did like the Dollars trilogy, like the Man with No Name trilogy. Very well regarded director, had a lot of talent. I don't really care for Once Upon a Time in America. I think it is way too long. Like, I want to say it was almost 4 hours, and it's just slow. And then there are scenes that are just like horribly unpleasant in it, and not like in a you can't look away kind of way, or, where it's like really compelling, but it's really unpleasant. It's like, no, it's just unpleasant, and that's it. Like, there's nothing truly redeeming about the scenes. Carl Weathers plays Apollo Creed, and he was in the first Predator movie. He played Dylan, and obviously that one has Arnold Schwarzenegger in it, and that notoriously, their first time seeing each other in that movie notoriously became a meme where they like lock hands and it's not like a handshake, it's like upward, but like they're both of those guys were so ripped for that movie that it just became a meme and became just this ridiculous thing because they're so like ripply and you just see their biceps and how bulging they are. He was also in Happy Gilmore as Chubbs Peterson. Happy Gilmore is a movie that I have seen more times than I could probably count. I used to watch it on VHS when I was younger. I would have been like 11 years old, probably 10, 11. And my friend Mike showed it to me, and I loved it so much that I made my mom get me a copy of it. And then I would watch that movie. I would go on a family road trip with a little like 9-inch TV VCR combo, and I would watch it all the way through, stop it, hit rewind, wait for it to rewind, and then start playing all over again, which drove my sister completely insane because she couldn't wrap her head around that. But that was just how much I was feeling Happy Gilmore, I guess. And Carl Weathers was also in the TV show Arrested Development, which is a great comedy. It's got a lot of hilarious humor in it, a lot of meta, a lot of strange jokes and things like that. It's so funny. It's one of my favorite shows. Carl Weathers plays an exaggerated version of himself, and he becomes an acting coach for one of the characters on the show, and it is so fucking great. Like, he is so funny in it. It's so great. And of course, rest in peace to Carl Weathers. He did pass away a few years ago. And last but not least, we have Burgess Meredith, who plays Mickey, and he was the Penguin in the Adam West Batman series from the 1960s, as well as the movie that accompanied it. So this is the thing with that series, okay? Anybody who's seen or heard of it knows that it's pretty notoriously ridiculous and over the top, but it is supposed, like, I see clips and like, I used to think it when I was younger, and I even thought it like pretty late into like, I probably thought it was supposed to be serious until I was in my 20s and somebody corrected me about it. But people think that that's not a comedy. Like, they think that that was just like they were being dead serious and like it was real. And it was just really campy, really deadpan, and just off the wall, insane humor. But it was meant to be funny. Like, you couldn't make that show. I mean, if you watch anything else from that era, it's not like all the other comedies were just like that, or it's not like all of the dramas were that weird level of seriousness. Like, trust me, it's just, I'm very into Batman, and it's very weird to think about. He was also in the Grumpy Old Men movies. I don't remember. I think he's in the second one also, which is called Grumpier Old Men. And I like those movies okay. My friend Brad was really into those when we were growing up. And he was also, I think, the narrator on that Twilight Zone movie from the 1980s that was the one that I've talked about recently that was like notorious. It like had a huge accident on the set and it caused the deaths of multiple people, including children. And it basically forced a bunch of changes to the standards of effect shots and movies and stuff. For casting notes, Sylvester Stallone was an unknown actor at the time and had very little experience as a writer. The producers who wanted to purchase his script had every intention of choosing a high-profile actor to play the role of Rocky, but Stallone insisted that he played the part. Real-life boxer Ken Norton was sought for the role of Apollo Creed, but he ultimately pulled out and the role was given to Carl Weathers. Carrie Snodgrass was originally chosen for the role of Adrian. No idea who that is. Like, I even looked her up. I don't even think I'd heard of a movie she was in. Definitely didn't even recognize her or anything. But a money dispute forced producers to look elsewhere from her. Cher and Susan Sarandon auditioned for the role, but Sarandon was deemed too pretty and Cher too expensive. But don't worry, Cher. We think you're pretty too. The role ultimately went to Talia Shire. For the plot synopsis, a down-on-his-luck small-time boxer in Philadelphia is offered the chance to fight the world heavyweight champion, hoping it will give him the opportunity to prove himself. For the tagline, his whole life was a 1,000,000-to-1 shot. Amazing tagline. Honestly, love that tagline. Fits the movie perfectly. I love it. Alright guys, let's just dive right into the plot of this motherfucking movie. So, of course, this movie kicks off with the most epic intro where the title Rocky is scrolling across the screen in massive letters that go from all the way from the top to the bottom in white print on a black background. And naturally, Bill Conti's epic theme song plays, and I don't know if this is the most recognizable theme song ever, but it's certainly fucking up there. It says that it's November 25th, 1975 in Philadelphia, and our title character Rocky Balboa, as played by Sylvester Stallone, is in a boxing match in front of a fairly small crowd. People in the crowd are telling the refs that they should stop the fight, and I'm not entirely sure why or whose side the crowd is even on. Like, I don't know that anything particularly dirty is happening, but I don't watch a lot of boxing. The fight looks a lot more rough and dirty than the average movie boxing match, but again, I don't know these rules, I don't know what you can and cannot do, really. Rocky takes his seat in the corner of the ring, and his trainer is basically telling him to stop dancing around and start really hitting this guy. Some random guy comes up to Rocky and asks him if he thinks that the fight will actually go 3 rounds, and Rocky seems to think that it will, but the guy is clearly just asking because he's gonna bet on the fight. The bell dings, and Rocky stands up and approaches the other boxer, whose name is Spider Rico, by the way. The two of them circle each other in the ring, and they keep wrapping each other up and landing a couple of shots on each other, but not really making much headway. But one of the times, Rocky gets hit in the eye and he starts bleeding, which apparently pisses him off enough to make him go into a flurry of aggressive punches as he knocks the guy down on the mat and then continues punching him before the round is over. The bell finally dings to end the match. Rocky walks off the ring while still holding the area over his eye where he started bleeding, and he heads back to the locker room and puts on a robe. Spider Rico is now laying on a bed in the locker room, and he kindly points out that Rocky got lucky tonight, which is very brave of him to say because a lot of people would be afraid to come off like a douche by saying something like that, especially after getting their ass beat all over the fucking boxing ring. One of the fight promoters comes by to pay the two boxers for their performance in the fight, and both of their winnings are only paid out of the original amount minus the cost of the use of the shower and locker room, and it's not a huge sum of money anyway. Rocky asks the guy when he fights again, and the guy says maybe in 2 weeks, but to give him a call. Then Rocky seems very distraught because, as we will learn very quickly, Rocky is not in a good place financially, and he knows that the sum of money he's getting for each match and how far apart these matches are is not going to, keep him afloat. It starts showing the opening credits as Rocky is walking home from the fight in his fedora and coat, and he stops by a pet store window to greet some of the animals in the front display. He keeps whistling at them and making noises as he's miming his punching techniques and struts across this very dead street. He comes up to a group of men who are singing surprisingly well in harmony with each other, and they're all standing around a trash can fire, and honestly, I just love that because people just don't sing around trash can fires anymore because this country has gone to complete shit. He takes a swig out of one of their bottles and then he continues on his way home as he keeps punching the air around him and practicing his footwork. And that's probably one of the least unhygienic things that Rocky does throughout the course of this movie is taking a sip of that bottle from a group of men who are presumably homeless. He walks up a short flight of stairs and into this very small apartment, which is his. And honestly, this place isn't as big of a shithole as you might actually expect, based on the outside especially. He walks over and greets a couple of turtles that he has in a large fishbowl on his kitchen table, and apparently these turtles are named Cuff and Link. He tells them that he did pretty good tonight, and he complains about the fact that they didn't come to see him, and this shows a startling symptom of head trauma for Rocky, as he seems to not realize that not only can turtles not attend a fight on their own while they're in captivity, but they also cannot respond to human conversation in any way because they lack the capacity to speak English, mostly because, they don't have vocal cords. But I don't want to be judgy here. Maybe I'm very privileged in the fact that I know all of this about turtles. He asks the turtles if they want to see their friend Moby Dick, and he goes and grabs a separate bowl that is full of water from his mantle. And of course, Moby Dick is his fish, even though Moby Dick was actually a whale, which is definitely a mammal, but I get that they're both water-bound creatures and they're very similar in a lot of ways. So Moby Dick is kind of a cute name, and he brings over the bowl to the turtles and guilt trips them by mentioning that if they could sing and dance, that he wouldn't have to be doing all of this shit with boxing. And again, it's I mean, this isn't so bad because he's guilting them, but they don't really even have the capacity to understand him, so that's really fine. I mean, it's not really cool, but Rocky starts talking to himself while looking in the mirror, and then he grabs what I guess is a photo of himself as a child and looks at it with this sullen expression. Then he grabs some ice from the freezer and holds the bear cubes to his eyebrow where it was cut open during the fight. By the way, not a great idea to do. Don't use bear ice. Like, wrap it in a towel or something. You shouldn't have bear ice on your face, or on an open wound, I should say. The next morning, he goes to the pet store and greets a woman named Adrian who works there, and he totally has a thing for Adrian. And I gotta tell you, Adrian, for my money, has to be one of the blandest characters, not only in this film series, but in all of cinema history, at least in the first half of this movie. Like, my God, she is such a bore. She's so painfully quiet and withdrawn and not social at all. But to be fair, I don't know that it's necessarily reasonable to judge her behavior based on the fact that we only really ever see her around Rocky, because honestly, he seems like the kind of guy that would make a woman either recoil in horror or curl up into the fetal position on the floor until he just went away. He makes an awful joke about how his turtle started choking and he had to hit it on the back to get it to stop. And the punchline is that the turtle was shell shocked by the experience. And that's just the kind of comedy that you would expect from a guy like good old Rocky. When I was probably about 10 or 11 years old, I had never seen any of these movies, and I was over at my friend Mike's house, and he had all 5 of the movies that existed at that time. He couldn't believe that I had never seen any of them, so he insisted that we watch one, and he was like, let's watch Rocky 4, which of course perplexed me because it made no sense that he would recommend that we start with the 4th movie, and I was afraid I'd be confused and not know what was going on. But he was not very far off base because Rocky 4 is legitimately incredible, especially to a kid who is around that age, because it's a much more intense and to the point type of movie. But I did eventually end up seeing this first one not too long after that, and I have grown to really enjoy it, despite it being a little slower and less exciting. Rocky looks over and sees a dog named Buttkiss in a cage, and he starts talking to it, and the dog keeps barking. And maybe this was normal in the mid 1970s, but I've rarely ever even seen dogs of any kind in pet stores that were up for sale, but I've also never even heard of a dog this fully grown and large being kept for sale in such a small pet shop, especially because usually you might see puppies, but that's even pretty rare. And this dog is a fucking bull mastiff, and even though I don't know a ton about different dog breeds, I definitely know that a mastiff is one of the larger dogs you can get. Plus, this cage is like a quarter of the size, maybe even smaller than that, than this dog should have. Like, it's legitimately crazy how little room he has to even like turn around in there. So like I said, Rocky clearly has a thing for Adrian, even though she's very quiet and awkward and doesn't really say much to him at all. And he eventually leaves the pet store and goes on his way down the street, walking to the middle of a loading zone at the docks. He sees the man that he appears to be looking for, and the guy immediately starts to run from him. And while instinctively you might think, hey, this is probably how a lot of people react to seeing Rocky just based on knowing him. But no, actually, Rocky's big thing in this movie is that what he does to make money outside of boxing is to work as a guy who shakes people down to get them to repay debts. So Rocky is paid as like an enforcer by the people who are owed the money by these people that he's chasing down. Rocky tells the guy, who is named Bob, that someone named Mr. Gazzo wants the $200 now, and of course Bob tells him he doesn't have it, and that's just because he's broke. But Rocky responds by saying that Mr. Gazzo told him that if he doesn't get the $200 from him, that he should break Bob's thumbs. And Rocky even says a pretty solid phrase that I've never heard before, and I don't know if Sylvester Stallone just made it up or if it used to be like more common, but it goes like this: if you want to dance, you got to pay the band. You understand? If you want to borrow, you got to pay the man. And by the way, I'm not going to do any Stallone impressions. I don't have a deep enough voice, and it's just really tough. If you ever want to hear a good impression of Sylvester Stallone, listen to Nick Kroll do one if you can find it. he's very good at it, and it's very amusing because Nick Kroll is also pretty funny. Rocky makes it clear that he's not actually emotionally involved in this whole ordeal, and the guy offers him the only money he has, which is $130. And when Rocky tries to tell him that he's $70 short of the total he owes, the guy tries to offer him his coat and says that it's probably worth 50 or 60 bucks, but Rocky just kind of turns him down and walks away, and clearly he just really bitches out on the whole breaking his thumbs thing. Rocky is met on the other side of the street by a car that he gets into the back of, and he explains what happened with Bob. Mr. Gazzo, who is in the front passenger seat, says that he trusts Bob to pay the rest of the money the next week like he told Rocky he would, and Mr. Gazzo pays him what appears to be a 20 for his trouble, and then tells Rocky that tomorrow he needs to collect from someone named Del Rio because he's late on repayment by 3 weeks. Mr. Gazzo asks Rocky how his fight went the night before, and Rocky says that it went well. Then the driver of the car asks Rocky if he got the license plate number, and Rocky's confused by the question, and the guy says the license plate number of the car that ran over his face. Because obviously Rocky is looking pretty beat up after this fight the night before, and Mr. Gazzo tells the driver to ease up on Rocky, but to pull over so Rocky can get out, and Mr. Gazzo can just talk to him privately. Rocky and Gazzo get out of the car and walk over near a fence on the other side of the street away from the car, and Gazzo chastises Rocky for not actually breaking Bob's thumbs like he was told to do. Rocky asks Mr. Gazzo how he actually knows that Rocky didn't break his thumbs, and Mr. Gazzo explains that he hears things and he knows he didn't do it. Mr. Gazzo explains to Rocky that it reflects badly on him if Rocky doesn't do his job. It's like he doesn't really mean business to the people he loans money to, capiche? And I believe capiche is Italian for, do you understand what I'm saying? And Rocky explains that he was thinking that if Bob had 2 broken thumbs, that he might get laid off and he might not be able to pay him back at all, but Mr. Gazzo tells Rocky to just leave that kind of concern to him. As Mr. Gazzo walks back and gets into the car, the driver makes it a point to roll down the window and say to Rocky, "So long, meatbag." And Rocky yells out that he should have broken the driver's thumbs, but he says it as the guy drives away, and it's kind of like an idle comment. Rocky goes to the gym where there are a ton of other boxers inside doing exercises and practicing sparring inside boxing rings. He goes to the locker room and attempts to open his locker, but he can't get into it, so he grabs a fire extinguisher and smashes the lock off the door. And when it opens, there's a bunch of other guys, like some other guy's stuff in there, and he turns around to see some guy who works at the gym, and he asks him what the deal is with his locker. The guy explains that his boss Mickey told him to put Rocky's stuff in a bag and give the locker to someone else who isn't a fucking bum piece of shit. This guy didn't say that last part, but if Mickey were here in this moment, he certainly would have. Rocky tells the guy that he can't believe they would do this to him because that locker has been his for like 6 years, so he just goes to see Mickey. The guy warns him that Mickey's in a bad mood today, but Rocky says that he is too. He comes up to Mickey, who's standing by one of the boxing rings watching the 2 men boxing inside it, and he's initially dismissive as Rocky comes to greet him. Mickey's played by Burgess Meredith, and I want to be clear, maybe it's just by comparison to Sylvester Stallone, but Mickey appears to be about 5.5 feet tall in this moment. I don't know how tall Stallone is, but he also doesn't take any shit from Rocky and explains to him that he took away his locker because he isn't running a soup kitchen, and he explains that the guy he gave Rocky's locker to is an actual contender, and Rocky is, as Mickey refers to him, a tomato. There will be some Mickey impressions here and there. And you know what? I might even do a Stallone impression just to see how bad it comes out. Mickey asks him who he fought the night before, and Rocky tells him it was Spider Rico, and Mickey immediately calls Spider Rico a bum. And by the way, Mickey's entire thing is that he's old and gruff and has a raspy voice, and he loves to call people bums or other insulting nicknames. He explains to Rocky that he has heart, but he fights like an ape, and most of the people he fights are bums, and he should strive for something better. Rocky doubles down and claims that he's proud of himself for the fight he had the night before, and that he's going to go take a steam now, but Mickey leaves him with a mean-spirited thought that he should consider retiring. That night, Rocky pays a visit to the pet store, where Adrian is of course working still, and he remarks to her about how cold it is outside, and he tries to ask her on a date to a basketball game, but she really doesn't say anything back to him because, as I mentioned, she's awkward as shit. He tells her about losing his locker at the gym and tries to save face by explaining that he believes people have stolen money from the locker over the years and that maybe it's for the best. And even though she doesn't say anything at all, I like to think internally she's saying, "Yeah, Rocky, I'm sure you were totally just about to give up that locker for that reason if it hadn't been taken away from you involuntarily." She's tending some birds in a cage, and Rocky messes with them by sticking his finger through the bars of the cage and pretending his finger is a worm. He tells her she should be careful at night around that area and tells her he's going to go home and make up a new joke to tell her the next time he sees her and that she should have a good night. And she actually does break her silence by saying goodnight too, but it's possible she's just so stoked that he might be leaving that she forgot to keep being just like a mopey sad sack for a while. Rocky walks down to a bar and is looking for a friend of his named Paulie. He goes into the back and gives Paulie a hard time about how Adrian won't go out with him despite all of his efforts because apparently Adrian's Paulie's sister. Paulie calls her a loser and says that she's pushing 30 years old and if she's not careful, she's gonna die alone. He tries to ask Rocky about getting a job with Mr. Gazzo, but Rocky is dismissive and says that he doesn't think Mr. Gazzo is hiring at the moment. Paulie suggests that Rocky should come over for Thanksgiving and try with his sister at that time because he's afraid that his sister will, as he so eloquently puts it, get all dried up if she doesn't start using her body. Yikes. Paulie has to go home, but Rocky stays to have a beer and talk to the bartender while a broadcast is showing an interview with famed heavyweight champion Apollo Creed, who is played by Carl Weathers. Creed comes off arrogant, as many famous boxers tend to, and he talks about someone he's supposed to be facing soon named Mac Lee Green. The bartender remarks to Rocky that Apollo Creed is a clown, but Rocky seems to respect Apollo Creed quite a bit for wanting to take a shot at the heavyweight title, because obviously Rocky would fucking love to do that himself. Rocky gets hassled by a bunch of kids who want him to buy them alcohol outside the bar after he leaves, despite them being underage, but Rocky refuses and then pulls one of them, who happens to be a girl, aside to tell her basically to do better. The two of them walk together and Rocky gives her a bit of a lecture that looks a bit more like he's just yelling at her about the bad people she's hanging out with. But as he gets her back to her apartment, house, whatever it is, and she deduces that he's telling her that if she hangs out with bad people, she's going to turn into one, and she basically tells him just to fuck off before going inside. This whole moment kind of seems pointless as far as advancing the plot in any way, but it's clearly included to show that Rocky is a good guy and cares about other people. It cuts to some office where Apollo Creed is meeting with some men who receive news that his opponent Mac Lee Green suffered a severe injury to one of his hands and will be unable to fight Apollo. One of the men suggests that Apollo could cancel the fight indefinitely if he really wants to face Green specifically, but it's pointed out that the frustration comes more from the fact that Apollo has been training for this and the timing is pretty critical. The fight was supposed to be 5 weeks out, and unfortunately, despite reaching out to a number of representatives for other boxers, all of the other reputable fighters are unavailable or could not get into fighting shape in that amount of time. But Apollo believes that they're just afraid because they know that they can't beat him and they're just making excuses for it. Apollo realizes that his best bet is finding some sort of local boxer from Philadelphia that would jump at the opportunity to face him, and he knows the people would just love that in Philadelphia. And gosh, I wonder who he might land on as far as local boxers go. It cuts to Rocky meeting with Mr. Gazzo, who explains that he heard Rocky had a date that night, and when Rocky explains that he's going out with Paulie's sister Adrian, the super likable driver makes a comment about having heard that she was, quote unquote, trigger warning, retarded. Sorry if that offends anybody, but this movie was made in 1976, and that wasn't an out of the ordinary word to use then. Rocky clarifies that she's just shy, but the driver says to take her to the zoo because he heard retards like the zoo, which for some reason pisses Rocky off a little bit. They really get confrontational with each other, and Mr. Gazzo has to put a stop to their bickering, and it cuts back to Apollo, and he's going through a variety of names with all of these guys. Like, I don't know any of these guys' names, and some of them don't even have credited names. They're just like the guy with Apollo or whatever. And they're trying to determine who would be a good option as far as Philadelphia boxers to fight. But it does seem like no one is really an ideal choice for him, and everyone has a myriad of problems of one kind or another. But he eventually finds Rocky's picture in a book, and he loves the marketability of his nickname, which is the Italian Stallion. Despite Apollo and his guys never having really heard of Rocky, they're reluctant to agree that he's a good choice for him to face because Rocky is a southpaw. And for those of you who don't know what a southpaw is, it's a left-handed boxer who uses a stance that is called the southpaw stance, where the right hand and right foot are forward, and they lead with jabs of the right hand and follow them with a left cross right hook. This is known to be a disadvantageous type of boxer for a right-handed boxer to face because they have to take things from unfamiliar angles to account for the unorthodox stance and style. Southpaw boxers also often fight against those who are right-handed and are experienced in it, but many right-handed boxers have very limited experience facing southpaws because there are so many fewer of them. And many of the approaches an orthodox right-handed fighter might use would put them at a disadvantage when facing a lefty and make them more vulnerable to getting hit by their dominant arm. And I also want to point out that it is never appropriate to pronounce the word Italian with a long I at the beginning, as Apollo Creed is doing in this scene, and they do throughout this movie. The word Italian comes from the country of Italy. Italian does not make any sense. It's not called Itali. Oh, also, Rocky claims that the term southpaw originated from some left-handed boxer from old Philadelphia based on the direction they were facing during a fight, but apparently it's actually believed that the phrase is an old baseball term that was coined based on the orientation of a baseball diamond with the cardinal directions. Like, I think it was the left-handed pitcher. It's like he was either facing south or his left arm was pointing south or something, which makes more sense because generally you're not like always in the same orientation when you're boxing somebody. That night, Rocky is walking with Paulie, who's talking about how much he hates working at the meatpacking plant. And of course, he wants to leave the job and work for Mr. Gazzo, but Rocky clarifies that working for Mr. Gazzo is not a great gig. But naturally, Paulie still wants Rocky to put in a good word for him. And the two of them talk a bit about how things are going and what the general setup will be for Thanksgiving. And Rocky is excited to see Adrian there. The two of them arrive at Paulie's place, where Adrian also lives. And Adrian is noticeably bothered by the fact that her brother just brought Rocky there without warning her. But Paulie makes it clear he wants her to stop making excuses and get out of the house for once, even when she tells him that she has a turkey in the oven at the moment. In response, he then opens the oven and throws the turkey out into the alley and tell her that now she has to go out even if she wants to eat the turkey. Adrian locks herself in her room in response, and Rocky tries to talk to her and apologize for the situation, but he feels like a bit of an idiot because he's never talked to a door before. And it's like, hey, Rocky, you do realize that you're not talking to a door. You're talking to Adrian, and the door is just between the two of you. The door is not actually who you're having a conversation with. And gosh, I hate to see the toll of all the head trauma that has been taken on Rocky as he gets confused over little things like this. He explains to her that he doesn't have anybody to spend Thanksgiving with and that he would like to take her out and they could have a good time together. And then she finally opens the door and she's already bundled up to go out, which is, I guess, her way of accepting his offer, but not actually by saying so. Rocky and Paulie start to walk outside, and then Adrian walks up, and while she's by herself, she looks in the mirror, and I was really hoping she was going to throw the audience a bone by at least like grinning with satisfaction at herself for like getting a date, like being excited about it. But no, because it seems like we're to believe that she wanted this, but she doesn't indicate that in any way other than by like going along with a date. Like, you could make the assumption that maybe she's just doing it because of all the pressure and that she might not actually want to. And I'll be honest with you, I get really confused through this sequence, even though there's a turkey and everything, because at first I didn't realize it was supposed to be Thanksgiving until you see the turkey, because it's just the three of them, like no other family members. So at one point I actually just figured it was probably a different night, but apparently this is actually Thanksgiving Day, and their get-together was only going to be this brother and sister that Rocky was going to have Thanksgiving with. And so now we're to assume that anything is actually going to be open on Thanksgiving night for Rocky to take Adrian on a date to. And I may be thinking about this too much, but why couldn't they use Thanksgiving dinner as a way to chat with each other and then have the date on some other normal night to have a date? And of course, they go to the local indoor ice rink. And when they get there, there's no one around. And it turns out it's actually closed, but they make it sound like it actually was open during the day for some reason. I mean, I guess it's probably like a business thing of like, oh yeah, it's an ice rink, not everybody wants to do that all year long. And there's probably a lot of people that maybe do that as a Thanksgiving tradition. And the Zamboni driver explains to them that they can't be in there and that they're closed. But Rocky proceeds to bribe him to let them stay by giving him $10 so that they can get 10 minutes of time on the ice, which in 1976 would have calculated out to roughly $3,700 in today's money. Now, actually, it was more like maybe $60 according to Google, but still, that's kind of an insane amount of money for 10 minutes of ice time, especially with Rocky being so fucking poor. So Rocky and Adrian end up sliding around on the ice for a little while, and Rocky's doing all of the talking because, as I mentioned, Adrian is unreasonably awkward, and she's also the only one that has actual ice skates on, but he's trying so hard to say anything interesting to her, but she's not giving him much to go on. He explains to her that his father once said that he wasn't very bright, so he should use his body to succeed in life, and she explains that her mother actually told her the exact opposite when she was younger as a way of body shaming, which explains a lot about how she turned out. Adrian asks Rocky why he wants to be a fighter because she doesn't understand why anybody would want to be a fighter and get hurt all the time. And Rocky's basically just like, yeah, you'd have to be a real moron to want to be a fighter, thus hammering home not only his lack of intelligence, but his heightened self-awareness that, like, yeah, he's not like the brightest guy, and that's kind of why he got into it. He also explains to Adrian that despite having been in over 50 fights, he is very proud of the fact that he has never once broken his nose, despite being hit there several times. She asks him why he does all this, if it ends up hurting him, and he asks her why she thinks he would, and she assumes that it's like he said, he can't sing and dance, so it's what he has to do. They get back to the front of his apartment, and he invites her inside, but she declines and says she has to go. He continues coaxing her into coming inside with him, and she's very reluctant to do so, but she finally goes along with him after he tells her that she can trust him. When she comes back inside, he offers her some food, but she declines that also. Or when she comes inside initially, she doesn't leave and come back. She goes inside initially, and then he introduces her to his turtles, Cuff and Link, and she says she knows them because she sold them to him. And he tries to get her to come over and sit with him on the couch, but she continues preferring to awkwardly stand there and even makes a point to look at pictures that he has around that mirror, like the one of him as a little kid. She tries to excuse herself and just leave by saying that she doesn't belong there and that she's never been in a man's apartment alone before. Rocky continually tries to ease her mind and comfort her, but she really just does not seem to want to go along with staying there. She explains that she isn't comfortable with the situation and that she really should go. And in the classiest move he could possibly make, Rocky puts his hand on the door and prevents her from leaving, which would be so much more of a red flag today. But I guess because of the era that this is in, this isn't taken as a particularly predatory move, really. He asks her not to go and takes her glasses off and hat off for her, and he tells her that he always knew she was pretty. She tells him not to tease her, and he says he's not, and just says he wants to kiss her. And they actually finally start to make out pretty passionately in front of the door, and it's kind of implied that they might have actually boned too, but it cuts to the next day and leaves that to our rated R imaginations. Rocky goes back to the gym and comes inside to find Mickey, who says that there were a couple of guys in there looking for a sparring partner for Apollo Creed, and he hands Rocky their business card. And then inexplicably, as Rocky looks at the card, he says, yeah, they're probably looking for a sparring partner for Apollo Creed, as if he didn't hear Mickey literally just say that to him. And Mickey gets so annoyed and tells Rocky he already said that. And Rocky turns around and confronts Mickey and asks him why for the last 6 years he's been giving Rocky such a hard time. Like, yeah, what the fuck, bro? Mickey turns around and says that Rocky doesn't want to know the answer to that question, but Rocky insists that he tell him. And Mickey yells out that Rocky had such potential, but he wasted on becoming a leg breaker for some second-rate loan shark. Rocky tries to tell him that it's a living, and Mickey says it's a waste of life. Rocky goes to Apollo Creed's office to meet with a man named Mr. Jurgens, who tries to propose an idea to Rocky, but Rocky interrupts him and says that he knows that he's been looking for sparring partners for Apollo Creed, and he really tries to make it clear that he's available if they need him, and that he won't take any cheap shots at Apollo during it. Mr. Jurgens explains to Rocky that his proposal is actually to offer him the chance to fight Apollo for the world heavyweight title, but Rocky just immediately declines in disbelief. Mr. Jurgens goes on to explain that Apollo has seen Rocky fight and he really wants to face him, and it's a chance of a lifetime for him. And I don't know, there's no way Apollo would have seen him fight. You know what I mean? He hasn't had a fight since then, and he hadn't heard of him before then. So this is clearly like smoke being blown up Rocky's ass about this. It cuts back to that night where Rocky's with Paulie and Adrian, who are sitting with him watching the press conference where Apollo announces that he is fighting Rocky for the heavyweight championship. And Rocky even shouts out Adrian unexpectedly, like this is a pre-recorded press conference. So Rocky is watching and he's a part of this press conference. So Rocky shouts out Adrian unexpectedly at the end of his interview, and now Adrian seems to just be tickled to death by whatever Rocky does. Paulie mentions to Rocky that he could probably use some help from the good people he's friends with to help him get ready, but Rocky doesn't really take the hint. Then Paulie gets very pissed off and just storms out of the room. Rocky goes to take off and says goodbye to Adrian. Then before he walks away, he mentions that even though he said that some of the things that happened on TV didn't bother him, in reality they did, and he just leaves. The next day, Rocky meets with Mr. Gazzo, who gives him $500 to help him out with training expenses, since he knows this is probably the first time Rocky has had a bit of good luck in a while. Later that night, Mickey comes to visit Rocky at his apartment, and I guess he's basically just there to remind him that he's very lucky for the opportunity he has at first, but he also points out that he doesn't have a manager and he knows a lot about it from his experience as a boxer and what can happen to someone who doesn't understand certain things about the business. Rocky is naturally distant with Mickey and is not too excited about what he's trying to do because of how Mickey has treated him thus far. They look up at Rocky's poster of Rocky Marciano, and Mickey mentions that him and Marciano have a lot of similarities, and they obviously have both of them have a lot of heart. Rocky points out that he has heart, but he hasn't gotten any lockers because of Mick, or he hasn't got a locker because of Mick. Mickey keeps trying to talk about the days when he was a fighter and how much trouble he had because he never had any management, and he's clearly trying really hard to relate to Rocky, but because he's been so cruel to him throughout the course of the movie, and even from what we've heard before the course of the movie, it doesn't come off very genuine, as he says that he wants to be Rocky's manager, so he doesn't experience a lot of the stuff that he did, and Rocky's not really buying into it, and he even feels like he doesn't want a manager at this point because the fight's already set and there's no need for one in his mind. Rocky explains that he needed Mickey's help about 10 years ago, but Mickey never wanted to give it to him. And Mickey even asks him why he never asked, and Rocky explains that he did ask and Mickey never listened. Rocky closes the door to his bathroom, and Mickey is getting very emotional as he's pleading with Rocky to let him manage him. Mickey very quietly mutters that he's 76 years old and defeatedly walks away from the closed bathroom door that Rocky is behind and goes to put on his hat and leave. Rocky comes out before he goes and immediately goes back into the bathroom and closes the door again once he realizes he's still there. But Mickey does finally leave and walks down the stairs outside, and Rocky begins yelling loud enough for Mickey to hear, and he lets out a lot of his resentment toward Mickey for not doing anything for him when he was younger. He says, You talk about your prime. What about my prime, Mick? At least you had a prime. I ain't had no prime. I ain't had nothing. My legs are going, everything's going, and no one's giving me nothing. See, terrible impression. Obviously, Rocky has a lot of pent-up frustration about the fact that Mickey never gave him the time of day before now, but all of a sudden, he just seems like all out of nowhere, he wants to manage him now that he's gotten this rare opportunity, and he wants to actually do something for Rocky, even though he hasn't ever been like this with him before at all. But eventually Rocky caves and he runs outside and chases him down, and we can't hear anything either of them are saying in this moment, but clearly Rocky asks him to manage him anyway, even though he's really torn up about his treatment thus far. The next morning, Rocky wakes up to his alarm at 4 a.m. to begin training, and honestly, this is the beginning of what I think appeals so much to people about these Rocky movies, especially the first one, despite it not being packed with excitement, which is obviously that he's such an underdog, but he dedicates himself to truly training and conditioning himself in the short span of time that he has to get ready for the fight. And it's just very inspirational that despite being down on his luck like this, he still digs down and finds a way to put his heart into it despite not having a great shot to win. Because sometimes you just feel tired, you feel weak. And when you feel weak, you feel like you want to just give up. But you've got to search within you. Try to find that inner strength and just pull that shit out of you and get that motivation to not give up and not be a quitter, no matter how bad you want to just fall flat on your face and collapse. Anywho, Rocky cracks a few eggs into a glass and drinks them raw, which, by the way, I have done before with a single egg, and it was a very unpleasant experience. And they say, I'm not going to recommend anybody do this at home. Definitely don't do this at home, kids. But if you are in the mood to do it, if you decide to, the thing you need to know is do not let the yolk of the egg break. That was all I was told. They said it would be even more unpleasant if you did that. But obviously, I just wanted to see if I could do it, even though it's not a good idea. Please don't try it at home. He goes inside in his sweats and begins running, or he goes outside in his sweats and begins running down the street. In the darkness of the early morning, he continually practices his punches, and he eventually runs up the steps at the Philadelphia Museum of Art. But he very visibly struggles to make his way to the top without getting winded, and it's like he can barely do it, and he has to slowly hobble back down once he reaches the top. Then he goes to see Paulie at the meatpacking plant, and they go into this freezer where all the huge sides of beef are just hanging. Paulie asks him how him and his sister are getting along together, and wants to know if he really likes her because he's not sure. And Rocky says of course he really likes her, but Paulie doesn't understand the attraction, and Rocky explains that it's because she fills gaps. And what he means by that is that what each of the two of them lack within their own lives and personalities, the other makes up for, and that's what he finds so appealing about her. Paulie very unceremoniously asks Rocky if he's screwing his sister, and Rocky doesn't care for the unpleasant question and things just start to get heated between the two of them, and Rocky explains that that's why he never set him up with Gazzo. Then Rocky diffuses the situation by repeatedly punching one of the sides of beef as an exercise, and it seems like Paulie cools off a bit and tells Rocky that if he does that to Apollo Creed, he'll be arrested for murder. And I'm just going to say something right now. If Paulie weren't Adrian's sister in this universe, he would be almost completely useless to the story, aside from giving Rocky access to the meat freezer. Like, he just doesn't seem like a particularly good guy, and when he's not bad-mouthing his own sister, he's throwing a shit fit about something for what seems like no reason other than selfishness. Later on, Adrian is tending to Rocky's hands that are very raw and beat up, but as she begins attempting to kiss him, he refuses her advances. Then she tries again, and he tells her that he's serious and that there's no fooling around during training. It's obviously very hard for him, but he tells her that he's not kidding and that she should just go back to making the food, and eventually he walks over and apologizes to her in the kitchen. And the whole thing with Adrian after they finally get together is that it clearly bothers her that Rocky subjects himself to the dangers of fighting, and although she does want to support him, she could just tell she doesn't really like it. Then at the gym, Mickey is coaching Rocky on improving his technique, and he uses a lot of unique and unorthodox methods to help him improve, such as tying a string around his feet to help fix his footwork. And he even chases two women away who come up to talk to Rocky while he's in the middle of training and is very unapologetic about sending them away. Like, it's basically like people are more excited to see Rocky in public because they know he's got this big fight coming. Mickey tells him to lay off the pet shop dame because women weaken legs, and Rocky says that he really likes this girl, but Mickey angrily growls at him that Rocky should let her train him then, and Rocky just backs down. He comes home and is greeted by Adrian at his front door, who adopted him the dog Butt Kiss from the pet shop. Rocky compliments how good she looks in her fancy red coat, and he's like over the moon about her getting him the dog, of course. Rocky is continuing to run around the city later on, and now he's taking the dog around on a leash. And when he goes to the meatpacking plant again, there's a TV news van outside, and he's very annoyed that Paulie would allow them to come there and disrupt what is supposed to be private training. Rocky reluctantly goes inside after hassling Paulie about what he's done, but the reporters are very interested in seeing Rocky's unique training techniques. In the room where Apollo Creed is, with all of the people, or all of his people, they have the broadcast of the Rocky story on TV, but only one of them is really paying attention. The guy watching tells Apollo that based on how Rocky looks, he should really check out what he's doing to see what he's up against because it seems like Rocky really means business. But Apollo just says that he means business too and doesn't really pay it any mind and just kind of dismisses him. And this is really just meant to solidify the understanding that Apollo Creed arrogantly assumes that he is so much better than Rocky and that Rocky couldn't possibly be a match for him. One night, Paulie comes home drunk and walks in on Rocky venting his frustrations to Adrian about what Paulie did with the reporters and how he doesn't know what he wants from him. But Paulie drunkenly yells out that he doesn't want anything from Rocky and he wants both of them to get out of his house. Then he grabs a baseball bat and threatens to break Rocky's arms so he can't use them to fight and smashes a lamp. And he lets out a lot of resentment toward Rocky for not having set him up with Gazzo. And Rocky's, of course, very put off by the whole experience. And then Paulie goes off on Adrian because he clearly blames her and says that he can't marry anyone because of her because she can't live alone. Which it's like, yeah, okay, Paulie, if that makes you feel better about not being able to get a wife, all right. And I'm not judging because, I'm not like a ladies' man. Paulie begins smashing other things with a baseball bat, and she grabs him and actually begins yelling at him that she doesn't owe him anything. She explains that she always treated him right and that he always made her feel like a fucking loser all the time. Then he makes some remark about how she's no longer a virgin as she runs out of the room. Then Paulie tells Rocky that he can't haul meat no more as Rocky is grabbing his collar, and then Rocky leaves to go comfort Adrian. And when he finds her in her room, she asks if he wants a roommate, and he says absolutely. At the gym, Rocky is practicing sparring, and Mickey is watching him and hyping him up, and he's delivering a stream of amazing quotable lines. He tells Rocky that he's going to spit nails, and then he says he's going to eat lightning, and he's going to crap thunder. Then a guy comes in and interrupts Mickey and introduces him to Rocky and Mickey introduces him to Rocky as a cut man. And according to Google, a boxing cut man is a crucial corner man during a fight who's responsible for preventing and treating injuries, specifically cuts, swelling, and nosebleeds, to help keep a boxer in the match and not get too far gone to continue competing in the match. They use tools like Vaseline and adrenaline mixtures as coagulants during the 60-second breaks between rounds to prevent the ref from stopping the fight. Rocky goes over as Mickey talks to the cut man and starts hitting a punching bag, and Paulie randomly comes up to talk to him. He tells him he figured out an angle to make some money off Rocky's name because he knows a little bit about advertising, and although Rocky doesn't know what Paulie could possibly know about advertising, he tells him that he's free to make whatever money he can off of his name. And this is another thing. Paulie absolutely owes Rocky an on-screen apology here, but he never even acknowledges what a douchebag he was being previously. Then we get a big running sequence with the epic theme song playing as Rocky goes through the different areas of the city, and it's interspersed with his other trainings like doing push-ups. And it's really showing how much progress he's actually making and how hard he's really working. And despite the fact that this theme song is so amazing, I really think they could have just gone without having any vocals in it whatsoever. I didn't even notice until I think I just downloaded the song to have it on a workout playlist or something. I didn't realize how many lyrics are in this song. But eventually this sequence culminates with Rocky very comfortably running up the same steps at the museum with no difficulty. And then of course he raises his arms in celebration at the accomplishment. And I assume that people still run up those steps and do that a ton to this day. And it probably annoys the crap out of Philadelphia residents. Rocky wakes up earlier the next morning and fixes Adrian's covers and then goes to the arena where the fight will be. There are these very large painted posters of him and Apollo Creed, and Mr. Jurgens, the guy who originally offered the fight to Rocky, comes in and asks him what he's doing there. Rocky points out that the poster is wrong because he wears white trunks with red stripes instead of red trunks with white stripes, like the painted poster shows. But Mr. Jurgens points out that it doesn't really matter and that Rocky should try and get some rest. Rocky sullenly comes home as Adrian is waking up, and he tells her that he can't beat Apollo Creed and he's not in Apollo's league, but he's not sure what to do about it. He explains that it doesn't matter and that he was a nobody before this all happened, so it won't matter if he loses. He explains that he's going to know for the first time in his life if he's not just another bum from the neighborhood. It cuts to the night of the fight, and there's a lot of intensity in the air as Rocky's hands are getting taped up in the locker room. And of course, Apollo has an entire team around him helping him prepare. Adrian wishes Rocky good luck as he kind of jokes around with her before going out to the floor. As Rocky makes his big entrance to the fight as the challenger, we can hear the voice of the announcers explaining what an inspiration Rocky is and how he's captured the imaginations of people all over the world. He's wearing a bright red robe with gold accents that he has the words Italian Stallion written on the back of. But above that, there's some kind of weird advertisement that Paulie had put there that earned him $3,000. But when Apollo makes his entrance, he comes out on a novelty boat, like it's some kind of parade float, and he's all dressed up with a wig on to make him look like George Washington. But for those of you who have never actually seen this, Apollo does not look much like George Washington, probably because he has a mustache. Then he changes into a robe that is very small and looks like the American flag, and he has like a very over-the-top American flag top hat on. I mean, this robe is so tiny. Like Rocky's he even mentions that his is really baggy, and Apollo's, it looks like something that, like, I don't know, like a woman would wear just before she was about to like seduce a guy. Like she would come to the door in a pornographic film wearing it to like lure him inside or something. It's that fucking skimpy. Apollo boasts about how it will be Creed in 3, meaning he will defeat Rocky within 3 rounds. And for those of you who don't know how long a boxing match can go, it goes as long as 15 rounds if the fight isn't called sooner for one reason or another. The announcer gets into the ring and announces special guest Smokin' Joe Frazier, who is actually from Philadelphia, and Frazier goes and talks to the two fighters, but he's clearly already like friends with Apollo. But we eventually get to the main event where the announcer introduces both of the fighters, and basically everything we see of Apollo really hammers home that he's not taking this fight particularly seriously, as he probably should, and doesn't see Rocky as a legitimate competitor to him. But eventually they take their robes off and the bell dings for the first round and the fight starts, and I'm going to do my best to spare you walking through every single step of the fight. I'm essentially just going to give you as a distilled version, recapping each round as best I can. In the first round, Apollo comes out and the two of them dance around each other for quite a while, but Rocky lands a great punch that ends up knocking Apollo to the ground for the first time in his career. Of course, that really gets Apollo's attention, and he comes up with renewed ferocity and gets the best of Rocky, but the bell dings before too much actually happens. Rocky goes to the corner, and he finally has a broken nose, and Mickey tells him to go for Apollo's ribs. Apollo's guy points out that Rocky doesn't seem to realize that this is a show and not a real fight, and that Apollo just needs to end it with this bum quickly. In the second round, Apollo initially corners Rocky and hits him with a flurry of punches and taunts him about how he thought he was a real fighter and he's not even doing anything. Of course, this causes Rocky to react severely as he lands a couple of solid punches and manages to unload a barrage of hits in rapid succession on Apollo. But even after the bell dings to end the round, Rocky is still full of fury and the ref has to separate them so that they'll stop fighting. Multiple rounds pass in rapid succession, and Apollo is shown having the upper hand and repeatedly getting the best of Rocky a lot of the time. And by the 14th round, the announcers are amazed that Rocky is able to even remain standing, and eventually, Apollo lands a punch that knocks Rocky to the floor. Mickey tries to tell Rocky from the corner to just stay down, but Rocky manages to struggle to his feet before the count can really disqualify him, and he shocks Apollo by wanting to continue. Rocky eventually manages to land a solid jab to Apollo's ribs, and as both fighters go back to their corners, Apollo's men are telling him that he's bleeding internally, and they want to stop the fight, but Apollo refuses to allow for that to happen. As the 15th and final round begins, The two go back and forth, and Rocky manages to land several devastating blows to Creed, but neither of them actually go down. And then when the match ends, the reporters praise Rocky for making it all the way through and call it the most remarkable demonstration of stamina in a boxing exhibition in the history of the ring. Despite there being a split decision, Apollo Creed is actually declared the winner, but Rocky declares that his only inspiration is Adrian, and she rushes out to the ring, and he repeatedly calls her name like, "Adrian, yo, Adrian." When she climbs into the ring, she tells him she loves him, and he tells her he loves her too, and they both embrace, and the movie freeze frames on the shot of them together as the score just fucking wails, and we roll credits. Alright, so trivia for this movie. After producers Irwin Winkler and Robert Chardoff became interested in the script, they offered Sylvester Stallone an unprecedented $350,000 for the rights. He had $106 in the bank and no car, and was trying to sell his dog because he couldn't afford to feed him, but he refused to sell the script unless they agreed to allow him to star in the film in the title role. They agreed on the condition that Stallone continue to work as a writer without a fee, and that he work as an actor for scale. After Winkler and Chardoff purchased the film, they took it to United Artists, who envisioned a budget of $2 million with an established star in the lead role. In their mind, someone particularly like Robert Redford, Ryan O'Neal, Burt Reynolds, Nick Nolte, or James Caan. When Winkler and Chardoff told United Artists that they could only get the screenplay if Stallone starred, United Artists cut the budget to $1 million and had Chardoff and Winkler sign agreements that they would be personally liable if the film went over budget. The final cost of the film, as I mentioned, was $1.1 million. Chardoff and Winkler mortgaged their homes for the last $100,000. Stallone was paid a base salary of roughly $35,000 for writing and starring in the movie, with his specific acting fee being an estimated $2,000 of that sum for the 25-day shoot. So that's all separate, obviously, from the $350,000 as I understand it. After the end of filming, Sylvester Stallone kept the two turtles, Cuff and Link, and as of June 2019, he still had them alive and well. The same turtles also appeared in the 2006 legacy sequel, Rocky Balboa, which was the sixth installment in the franchise. Rocky's dog Buttkiss was Sylvester Stallone's real-life dog, the one that he couldn't afford to pay to feed. Most of the scenes of Rocky jogging through Philadelphia were shot guerrilla style with no permits, no equipment, and no extras. The shot where he runs past the moored boat, for example, the crew were simply driving by the docks, and John G. Avildsen saw the boat and thought it would make a good visual, so he had Sylvester Stallone simply get out of the van and run along, while Avildsen himself filmed from the side door of the van. A similar story concerns the famous shot of Rocky jogging through the food market. As he runs, the stall keepers and the people on the sidewalks can clearly be seen looking at him in bemusement. While this works in the context of the film to suggest they're looking at Rocky, in reality, they had no idea why this man was running up and down the road, being filmed from a van. During this scene, the famous shot where the stall owner throws Rocky an orange was completely improvised by the stall owner, who had no idea that a movie was being filmed and that he would be in it because of it. Sylvester Stallone insisted that the scene where he admits his fears and doubts to Adrian the night before the fight be filmed, even though production was running far behind and the producers wanted to skip it. Stallone had only one take for the scene, even though he considered it to be one of the most important scenes in the entire film. Stallone improvised monologue that Rocky delivers after turning down Mickey's offer initially to manage him. Stallone has since explained that the bathroom of the tiny apartment in which they were shooting really did smell like death. The ice rink scene was originally written to feature 300 extras, but the production couldn't afford so many people. When Stallone turned up to the shoot of the scene, to his horror, there was only one extra, so Stallone hastily threw together the scene as it exists in the completed film. The scene has become one of the most popular in the entire Rocky saga. I mean, it's not even top 20 for me, but okay. Sylvester Stallone and Carl Weathers suffered injuries during the shooting of the final fight. Stallone suffered bruised ribs and Weathers suffered a damaged nose, the opposite injuries of what their characters did in the movie. During the audition, Carl Weathers was sparring with Sylvester Stallone and accidentally punched him on the chin. Stallone told Weathers to calm down, as it was only an audition, and Weathers said that if he was allowed to audition with a real actor, not a stand-in, he would be able to do it a lot better. Director John G. Avildsen smiled and told Weathers that Stallone was the real actor and the writer. Weathers looked at Stallone thoughtfully for a moment and said, "Well, maybe he'll get better." Stallone immediately offered him the role. The poster above the ring before Rocky fights Apollo shows Rocky wearing red shorts with a white stripe when he actually wears white shorts with a red stripe. This was an actual mistake made by the props department that they could not afford to rectify, so Stallone came up with the idea for the scene where Rocky points out the mistake himself. The comment about Rocky's robe being too baggy came about the same way. The robe delivered to the set was far too baggy for Stallone, so rather than hope people would notice, the character himself simply points it out in the movie. The iconic shot of Rocky running up the steps of the Philadelphia Art Museum came about because of Garrett Brown. The Philadelphia native had recently invented the Steadicam, and he was preparing to fly to Los Angeles to try and sell it. He'd shot some test footage following people around corridors, but he wanted to shoot something that even the most experienced filmmakers could look at and wonder how he did it. He had his girlfriend run up and down the museum steps while he followed close behind. Using that footage, Brown sold the camera on his first day in Los Angeles. Several months later, John G. Avildsen saw the footage and felt a similar type of shot would be perfect for this film. Avildsen hired Brown and the Steadicam, and several months after running up the steps filming his girlfriend, he was back up the steps filming Sylvester Stallone. When Gazzo is talking to Rocky about not breaking the dock workers' thumbs, Gazzo pulls out an inhaler mid-sentence and uses it. It wasn't part of the script. Joe Spinell had an asthma attack, the actor who plays Gazzo, and needed his inhaler. John G. Avildsen liked the authenticity of the moment and what it brought to the scene, and he left it in the film. This movie has 5 direct sequels: Rocky II from 1979, Rocky III from 1982, Rocky IV from 1985, which is the best, Rocky V from 1990, and Rocky Balboa from 2006, which is that legacy sequel 30 years after the first one. It also spawned the spin-off series Creed, which follows the boxing career of Apollo Creed's son, Adonis Creed. There was Creed from 2015, Creed 2 in 2018, and Creed 3 from 2023. And I want to say that they might have ousted Stallone from those because he was in the first one, and I think he had some part in writing it at least. I mean, he was definitely credited for the characters and stuff. But anyway, I've never watched those, but I think at least the first one, and I really want to watch it now. I do have a couple of IMDb nuggets. Now, if you're new to the show, this is stuff from the IMDb trivia section that is so stupid that it should never have been submitted to the trivia. And usually all I do to find these is sort by things that people voted as not being interesting and find them that way. But there's not actually always that many that are that bad that are worth mentioning. So the 2 that I found were Rocky's pet fish is called Moby Dick. He apparently named it after the eponymous whale in the novel Moby Dick from 1851 by Herman Melville. Yeah, I think we figured that one out all on our own. So this is a standalone trivia tidbit. First film in the Rocky franchise to get a PG rating. This might be noteworthy if this weren't the very first movie, and if most of the other movies other than Rocky IV weren't also rated PG. Or not Rocky IV. Rocky V was rated PG-13. My bad. I said 4. All right, on to info and ratings. Opening weekend, $5,488. Wow. Worldwide gross, $117.3 million. IMDb rating, 8.1. Letterboxd rating, 4.1. Rotten Tomato critics score, 93%. Rotten Tomato audience score, 69%. Personal rating 4.5 out of 5 stars. Praise, don't get me wrong, this is a really solid first installment, especially given when it came out. I do really enjoy it. It's very inspirational and pretty well written. It's obviously a critical first installment, and although I doubt they expected this to turn into such a big franchise, it really did a good job of paving the way for the other movies it spawned. Criticism: the entire Pauly experience of this movie is just unpleasant, even though it probably did add a good amount of drama. All right, everyone, thank you for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Have a good rest of your day. Bye now.
I'm here to welcome you.